So hello everybody, ConvertWithMoss version 13 is out now and it brings many new features. And if you are a long-term user of ConvertWithMoss, you will notice that there is a new section here. But before we dive into that, what is it actually? ConvertWithMoss is a totally free multi-sample converter, which means you have many source formats like Native Instruments Kontakt or several workstations like Korg formats or Yamaha formats or Waldorf, Quantum, Iridium or good old sound font formats, SFZ and so on. Or you can also use simple waveforms or AIF files or FLAC files to create a proper multi-sample. Multi-sample means a setup of key ranges as well as velocity layers with additional parameters like, for example, envelopes. And what does this new section do here? You can now choose to create either presets, which means a single multi-sample output, or you can create libraries which gather several presets together into one file, or we can create now performances, which is totally new. The idea here is that you have a setup of different sounds which form one multi-sample, and these are also arranged in key ranges and different MIDI channels. So something for a live setup, which you want to transfer then also in a different format. But we will have a closer look at that in a second. Let's start very simple with presets. So the idea here is with a tool, you select a folder and everything that is found in that format in that folder will be transferred into a preset. So for example, if I go here with Kontakt format and I can have a look at my samples folder with some very old samples in here, for example, with electric pianos, or let's go with acoustic pianos because there's only 2 samples in there, and let's pick that. And for each of them, you will have an output file. Let's say we go with let's go with good old sound font format and let's convert that to an output folder. And now it's doing its thing. And we will have now an output folder somewhere here on the desktop. Here it is. And if we open it, you will see there are 2 files created, one for each of these source input files. And you get also a log file with that where you can see again what happened here in the conversion process. So if you have lots of processing going on for many files, you can check then if everything was fine afterwards as well. And if you open that in a free polyphone editor, you see one sound here, this piano sound. And that's the idea of the other one. So if we go here now to library, you see only some formats are now supported, which allow to gather together several presets into one file. And this can be done with Decent Sampler. With Korg, we gather that into a KSC file. And we have SoundFont 2, which is now also newly supported for these library formats, and Yamaha workstation format as well. So let's maybe go again with a sound font. And if I say now we want to have a library, we expect that both of these pianos go now into one file. And there you can also give a name for this library, which will contain all those single sounds. So let's do it. And we should now have one file which contains these 2 pianos. And something needs to be mentioned, there is no check about the amount or how huge these are. So if you have too many input files which are much too big, you might run into issues. So plan that a little bit before what you put into such a library. And let's have a look at that again. So here is our piano sound font file. And again, let's load that in polyphone. So, and here we see that we now will have 2 piano sounds. So let's close that down. But what does this third thing do now? So performance. If we take a look here at a Kontakt multi, which looks like this. So it has many different sounds, which we could also check out here. Here's a bass and here's some some orchestra hits, so a complex setup for playing one of my Aurelian songs called Chaos. And you see also we have here a MIDI channel 2 and we have a MIDI channel 1. So that's how I play live, either with two keyboards or with a switcher. So you can switch between two layers of different sounds. And I did it here in Bitwig for demonstration purposes. So we have now MIDI channel 2. And if we switch to 1, we have different sounds on there as well. And the idea is now with that tool, with ConvertWithMoss, you can now transfer that, such a complex setup, also in different formats. And the first one supported now is now 1010music format. For example, you can do that on the blackbox or their bitbox or what all the names of their devices are. They all have the same sample format, and they have one big limitation. They don't have key ranges. Totally stupid, because if you had key ranges, you could have 16 layers of sounds with key ranges, so you could do a full live set, complex songs with that, but that's sadly not in their focus. But I found a workaround, pretty stupid one. So what I did was simply, if there is a key range, I assign an empty sample to everything that's outside of this key range, and this works surprisingly well. So yeah, it's a totally empty sample which does nothing, and so you don't have any sound there where there should be no sound. And yeah, let's try out something like this. So if I have now this NKM here as an input for this process, I have this here on a desktop in a test folder. It's a single file. Let's maybe also have a look at that. So we have here this test file. It's simply one NKM and with many different samples for all these different layers. So let's try that out. If we create now a performance for 1010music as well, maybe let's delete the output folder so we only see what we create now. So let's do that. And you will see that it's doing many things. It says it adds all the single instrument sounds it found in the NKM, and it also combines it to stereo files, which is also new for the 1010music destination, because I somehow did not notice that it cannot put together any stereo panning information. So I try now to combine split stereo files into proper stereo files. It's not always working. For example, with that sound, you have different loop points on the left and the right side, so you cannot combine that. That's something which needs to be fixed then in the source material. And it says it's done. So let's have a look at the output folder. And here you see there is a folder now created, Chaos. And it has all these different single instrument sounds in a subfolder, and this subfolder contains now the stereo combined output files. Okay, and you have now these presets, and you have now this fake silence waveform, which is totally empty. And if you look here at the preset file, you will see that it references all these subfolders for all the slots. So you can have up to 16 slots. Kontakt can have up to 64, but nevertheless, at least we have a 16 here, which is still many different sound materials, because most of the workstations you have out there only have 8 or 16. So 16 is on the good side. If you look here at the details, you see you have this silence thing assigned for example, here from 0 to 85, where this hard creak sound should not sound. And also on the upper part from 114 upwards, it's also assigned to not have a sound. You need to copy that to your SD card for the black box here, for example, and there is a presets folder, and you need to copy that folder to this preset one. If you put the samples somewhere else, you would need to adjust them in the preset file, because they have absolute file names in there. You could do that with search and replace, but I think that's quite a nice layout to keep it like that. So let's remove here the card and let's put it in a black box. And here in a black box, I had loaded it before, so it did load it automatically, but let's load something else. And then you see in a preset list, I have also this Chaos file, and I can say load, and then it will load rather quickly these different single sounds. And something that I need to mention as well, it has a pretty strange function that if you go here in editing to see the MIDI setup, you see it's on channel 3 and not on channel 2. The thing is, everything on MIDI channel 1 is treated as omni. So if you set something to MIDI channel 1, it will sound all the time, which is rather stupid. There is no specific setting for omni mode here. So channel 1 is omni mode. So what I did is I'm just increasing all the channels by 1. So if it's in the original file on channel 1, it's now 2. And if it's channel 2, it's now 3. So a bit of a, yeah. And if something is set to omni, it will be on channel 1. So it works as expected, but you need to reconfigure maybe your master keyboard to play one channel upwards. So let's check that out. So if we remember here on Kontakt on channel 2, I have the setup, this bass, more strings, and here strings. And now we have that on the black box. Let's switch to the black box. It sounds a bit more rough because there's no reverb on it. So the reverb settings from the multi, so which are on the upper level on the multi, they are not transferred to there. So you could now also add reverb on the black box to that, and you can also get a similar sound. Also, you might need to tinker a bit with the envelopes and tinker a bit with the volume settings. They are not perfect, but nevertheless, the setup is already working, which is awesome. So you have only that sound that should sound here. Also that funny orchestra hits and stuff like that. I think that's really a great thing. And these will not be the only format. I will definitely look also in other formats in the future as an output. So to help live keyboarders to transfer their sound sets to other devices. But there is more new stuff in there also for the normal transfer process. And one thing I extended is this Korg format, which is basically supported on all the Korg workstations there ever was. It's still the same format. The only thing that changes is the program, and the program is not supported because it's complex, not documented, and different for each workstation. But the basic sample setup is the same. One issue that is so far only KMP and KSF was supported. So KSF contains the actual sample, and KMP is a very basic setup for a key range multi-sample, but only for one velocity layer. So it does not support velocity layers, and it also only supports mono files. So you also cannot gather together the left and a right stereo split, for example. So that's what I try to fake a bit with KSC. So the KSC format is just a helper to load several of these files at once, but it does not say anything about the structure. But if you open such a file, you will see that there are similar names in there. So there is a tape O and the tape 1. So these are just increasing numbers. And there is a second one, soft. What I do now is I try to put them together into stereo files, because in their name, in their KMP name, which is inside of the file, they have an ending of -L and -R for left and right channels. So that's what I'm trying to do. And this works pretty nicely. And you have an option for that in ConvertWithMoss. If you enable that one, it will not look for KMP files, but it will look for KSC files and will then try to do this trick on these files. And if you just use this folder I just showed you, which contains these 3 different sounds, which are actually stereo sounds, but they don't have any configuration for that setup. We will try now to transfer that with that setting enabled here to use KSC files. And let's create, for example, SFZ, and let's go to convert and do that. And as you already see, it's done that pretty nicely. So we have now 3 output sounds. And if we have a look at the output, so it's now in this test folder, you see we have these 3 sounds ready. And KSC files are also supported now. If you choose a library, it will create a KSC file with these different left-right mappings, as you saw also here in this file I showed you. And this might also help to have that easier loaded in your Korg workstation. Last but not least, we have the nice decent sampler format, which is getting more and more famous. And if you're a frequent watcher of my YouTube channel, you notice that I have met Dave in Berlin at Superbooth, and since then I have a contact to them, and he answered all my questions, and I could fix many issues with decent sampler. Many thanks for that, Dave. And you have now also a new feature, because you can now use templates for the user interface. So that was a wish of several users, that we can change that, because so far I only had reverb in there, 2 knobs, and they also did not work. They work now, but you can change that. And what you can do is you have now 2 templates for these sections. One is for the effect section, so you could add more different effects like chorus or reverb or what you ever want to have in there, and one template for the user interface. And you can also reference images in there, and you can put that as well in there, and it gets automatically copied and integrated into the output. To use that here, you need to select a folder. If there's nothing here, the default templates I use, which create simply these 2 knobs. But if you select a folder anywhere, let's create, for example, a new one here. Let's have here UI input or something like that on the desktop. And let's select that folder. In here, it's empty so far, but what you can do now is click this button which says create templates in the selected folder. And if you click that, it says, yeah, it did work, and you will get now these 2 XML snippets. And if you look at them, you will see here that's a section to add more effects. So it contains the reverb one, and that one contains here the setting for the user interface. So you can change these to your heart's alike, but it should meet this structure. You always need to have here UI, and here you always need to have effects. And there is a detailed documentation how this works, or how these elements work, on the decent sampler page, where you can see the manual. And if you will look at that, I guess you know what you're doing. And you can also reference here images. So normally you have a background images or specific images for your controls. And for example, if you reference here, I don't know the exact attribute now, but if it would be something like this, my image dot ping, then this could be put into that folder as well. You can also create subfolders if you want to aggregate them, and they will be integrated then into the output. So if you create, for example, a library, this will be then part of this library as well. Pretty helpful if you create many decent sampler files and want to have your specific branding with that. So lots of new features in version 13, the tricky number, and I hope you like it, dig it, and yeah, what do you think about it? Write me down in the comments, and until next time, make some funky music.